Welcome to the Not in the Job Description podcast. I'm Scott McLaughlin.
And I'm Chris Kiernan.
No matter what type of job you've had, there were situations that happened to you during work that you couldn't wait to tell your friends about.
We interview a variety of guests about some of their crazy stories from work, from entry-level food service industry jobs to doctors and attorneys. We will explore funny, gross, embarrassing, scary, and sometimes almost unbelievable stories that people have experienced while on the job.
Keep in mind that our guests or the companies they work for may be masked in order to protect the innocent, or maybe even the guilty. On today's episode, we talk to Phil and his experience with the United States Marines. Welcome, Phil.
Thank you.
So I wanted to ask you, at a certain point, you had to make a decision that you're going to go into the military. At what point did you decide, yeah, I'm going to go for the Marines?
Well, I was in high school, and I wasn't exactly the best student.
I believe it.
And I was undiagnosed ADHD, probably severely ADHD, and an alcoholic. But probably decided that it wasn't the best thing to go to college because that would have been a waste of my dad's money and my time. So I thought, well, the Marine Corps, they'll put some discipline in me, and they have the best uniforms. So
That they do. Well, I'm glad that you made that decision because I can tell you, while I was mature enough to know that I would have not done well in the military at the age when most people go into the military, I don't know it would have worked out well for me. So, tell me about, let me just preface this by saying Chris is also, he has some experience in the military as well. And he went into the Army, but he went in a little bit later in life than a lot of the 18-year-olds or 17-year-olds coming right out of school. What was it like for you being brand new, walking into, where did you your basic training?
San Diego, MCRD, San Diego Marine Recruit Depot.
Okay.
San Diego.
Were you scared out of your mind when you first showed up?
I'm not going to lie, yeah. It's a little overwhelming when you get on those yellow footprints and drill instructors yelling at you, and you're like, what have I done?
And did you give him a reason to yell at you, or was it just you're in the general yelling vicinity?
Pretty much, I gave them some reasons to yell at me. But everybody they yell at everybody. They're indiscriminate about that. They do a lot of yelling.
Was that your experience as well, Chris?
Yeah, it was. I was a little bit older. I was like 21 when I went in. So I had been working, so I was kind of used maybe to, when we worked together, we had a district manager that would come in and yell at us if the pop machine wasn't clean, right? So that kind of softened some of that, but it was still scary as hell. And this was right after Full Metal Jacket came out. And the drill sergeants were basically saying some of the exact same lines. We get off the bus, we're still in our civilian clothes, and they're in our face, where you from, boy? So I'm biting my lip to not laugh because if they see you laughing, you're hosed, right? And then when they start dropping, oh, you're from Texas, only two things from Texas, right? So I'm giggling. What are you laughing at? Just start pushing. And I could barely do 10 push-ups, and I'm like struggling for 5 minutes before they let me get up.
I bet you by the end of basic, you could do a lot of push-ups.
Oh, yeah. I could
Lots
for
of practice,
sure.
yeah.
But yeah, scared out of my mind, just like Phil said, like, what the hell am I thinking? But it's too late. You're there.
Yep.
So what's your best memory from basic training, Phil?
My best memory? Probably the rifle range. I was always good at that, and that was fun. But that's probably the highlight.
So you
There's
were
a lot
private,
of lowlights, not a lot of
private
highlights.
pile then.
Yeah. Except for, I was the guy from Full Metal Jacket, except for I didn't shoot the drill instructor.
That's interesting. I know, Chris and I have been friends since we were 16. So when he made that decision to go in the military, I was a little bit blown away. Like, that's fantastic. And, again, we're still all trying to find our way in this world. And there's one thing I will never forget. Chris goes away to go to basic training. And when he came back and he knocked on our apartment door to come say hi to us, he was in his uniform. I don't know if you just got back or what. He was in his uniform, and I opened the door, and I think Chris maybe lost 25, 30 pounds on a frame that was not that heavy anyway. He was lean as could be. Right. And it reminded me, my sister had gone into the Air Force, and my sister was always a really skinny kid. And when she came back from basic training, she was heavy. And my sister explained to me, no, listen, if you go in and you're fat or you have any extra weight, it's going to go away. But if you go in there thin, you are going to put on weight because you just eat everything you can all the time you can. The story she gave anyway is that they only gave you so much time to eat. And if you didn't get it done then, you were putting stuff in your pockets because you were running everywhere. And that she would run with food in her pockets and everybody else would too. And you would just eat whenever you could. Did you guys experience that?
Yeah, I know the skinny people always ate first, and the heavy set, well, there wasn't a lot. I mean, they weren't fat, but they called them fat privates. And they were the last ones to eat. And then when the guide sat down, when he started eating, he ate first. And when he was done, everyone was done. So you had to shovel it in as quickly as possible.
That's funny. And Chris, so did you eat first or last?
Actually, they broke us down more by like your platoon. So there really wasn't, weight didn't factor in when you ate or when you didn't eat. I was actually pretty thin, even though, I mean, now I'm not, of course, but back then when I went in, I think I weighed like 160 and I came out at 145. So
yeah,
for my height, that was probably where my weight should have been. I am kind of reminded real quick here of a great story when you're talking about the eating and the mess hall. So we're there and it was our platoon's turn to be on KP duty. So we had the whole weekend, and I was on the drink station. So all day, 3 meals, every meal, I just stood there and handed people cups of ice, and they would go and pick out what they wanted. Well, right beside the drink station was the dessert station. So there was a group of females that were coming through the line, and I'm standing right there, and this girl who was a little bit on the bigger side, she goes to grab this piece of cake, and this drill sergeant comes running up behind her, and she's like, or the drill sergeant's like, "Private, your ass is fat enough. You don't need no goddamn chocolate cake." And it's, again, just like the first day, I'm trying so hard not to laugh. I'm biting my lip. I'm biting my tongue. Like, do not laugh because you're going to be in trouble. And I pulled it off. I didn't laugh. So she's walking away, mumbling under her breath, "Don't call me fat." But she didn't grab the cake. I can tell you that much.
And I do remember when Chris finally came and spoke to us when he came back from basic training. And, all I knew about basic training, having never been through it, was what you see in the movies. And he kind of whatever. It's not that bad. It's just, there's a huge difference between a 17 or 18-year-old and a 21-year-old in their maturity and understanding of what's really happening to you. You're being molded into a group of people that are all the same. But when you're 17 and maybe you've never been outside of your parents' purview before, you start to take that stuff personally. And, people were, Chris told me that, hey, these kids take this stuff. They really get in their heads about it. People are crying and stuff. And he was like, I just blend it in. You don't get yourself in trouble. Don't stand out too much and you'll be fine. But evidently, you had a lot of people you saw that didn't take that advice.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough for those young kids. So I think you said you went in right out of high school. So did you find the mental aspect of it? You get used to the physical part.
Yeah.
After 2 weeks, you're getting up, you're doing the push-ups, you can run the 10 miles. But it's the mental thing that really gets a lot of people.
Yeah, I was in good shape then, and it's like you said, it's the mental, it's the psychological part of it is the difficult part. You're talking about what we call mess and maintenance week, the 1 week where they work you and you do all the cooking and cleaning and mowing and all that, and they about broke me on that week because that was like one of the hardest weeks. You're working from sun up to sundown, and one day I was just having a bad day, and a drill instructor was, like you said, making me push for nonstop, and it just happened to be my 19th birthday, and I was just missing home, and I was just ready to quit. But I was like the low light of boot camp.
Not being a military guy, is that an option? I'm just going to quit.
Not really.
No, they threaten you with non-judicial punishment, which we call office hours. It's kind of, you go through a process, and it's like a stain on your record. But I think you can, but it's very difficult.
So then you get through basic training, and you were better than me. I was reserve, so I got through basic training and my initial training. Then I'm home, and I'm just doing 1 week in a month. You, of course, were full on. So kind of after you got out of basic training. And I think you were maybe enduring some conflicts, right? Desert Storm and things like that, right?
Yeah, Desert Storm, Desert Shield, Desert Storm. Went over there. I think that was January of '91. I actually we had a my A gunner was a reservist. They augmented us with reservists because we were like, I was on the rifle range at the time, and they pulled us back, and then they augmented us with reservists, and then we flew over. Yeah, that was a pretty hairy situation.
So that had to be a little scary. Well, how long from when you got out of basic training were you finding yourself overseas?
That was probably 4 years after I got out of basic training. So I was a corporal then and a team leader, but I had done other deployments overseas. I had done Marine Expeditionary Units, MUs they call them. 2 of those, 6-month deployments on ship in the Mediterranean, amphibious assault ships, and you go out there and you're ready for anything that happens. When you hear about something going on, like in the Gulf of Suez or whatever, and there's a response, and Marines are out there, or Lebanon or whatever, it's those guys.
You just get called up and it's time to go.
Yep.
Interesting.
Fly off on a helo and you're on land.
Well, I wanted to ask you, I know that a lot of people will have situations that happen in the military. And it's funny, I think I might be a couple years younger than you, but I know as I was going through like school and things like that, there wasn't a lot of military skirmishes that were to be had. Like, I think Stripes was probably one of the biggest military recruiters that I had seen because, you know, outside of running into Panama and taking care of some business, there wasn't any giant military skirmish. But when you got to, was it Desert Storm?
Desert Shield and then Desert Storm, yeah.
When you got there, did you end up seeing a lot of action as far as having to be engaged in fighting?
Well, first we had to go through what they called the breach. They had cleared, there was a huge minefield, probably, it seemed like it was a mile long, but I'm not sure how far it was. But we had to, they cleared it as best they could with mine clearers, and then we had to drive through and follow. They told us to follow the same tracks that the guy in front of you is on, and if they happen to blow up, just push their vehicle aside and keep going. And we were in full MOP level 4 gear, gas mask, charcoal suit, everything. You might think that wearing a charcoal suit in the desert's fun, but
that's exactly what I was thinking.
It's really not. And we had sandbags all on the bottom of the Humvee just in case, but pretty hairy. I'm not gonna lie. It was a lot of smoke, a lot of fires. There was explosions everywhere, and like I said, it seemed like we were going through this thing for about an hour. It was probably 10 to 15 minutes. I don't know, maybe, but it was, and I wasn't driving, which made it even worse because, you know, you don't have any control over the situation. Right. And you're like, you know, and my A gunner was a kid from Baltimore who I don't think had a driver's license prior to coming into the Marine Corps. And I'm just like, all the tracks in front of you, and I'm working the radio, and he's driving, and I'm thinking, you know, this guy's gonna kill me. But
yeah, I'm sure that little advice of, hey, if the guy in front of you blows up, just push him out of the way and keep going. That sounds like that's great. We got somebody in the lead of us, but then you realize they give that same advice to the people behind you.
Yeah.
So
yeah, exactly. And there's you know, armored vehicles that are burning and on fire, and you're just like, God, please let me get through this. And then once we got through, the vehicles in front of us just took off. We were told to follow, you know, stay on their heels. And then we get in there, and there's Iraqis everywhere. They're all wanting to surrender to us, and we're just pushing past them. We're not even stopping. We're just waving to them.
Now, I'm sure this isn't like government secrets, but when you went through your training, did they give you any idea? Like, listen, here's the playbook. If these guys all want to surrender, here's how we're going to handle it? Or was that something that you weren't even ready to even see this happen?
Well, we were briefed on how to handle prisoners of war and if you were to take someone prisoner and what to do. But by the time we stopped, we were way past all that. So then we dug in and just stayed there for, I don't know, several months.
So that had to be, I'm sure there's a lot of hurry up and wait in the military.
Yeah.
And especially since, you know, you can go through plans and plans and plans, and they never work out the way everybody thinks it's going to. And I'll never forget, while you were out there, you know, in a foxhole dug in, I was in the very dangerous area of Purdue University. And I remember visiting my friend Jim, and this was going on, and we just looked at each other and we said, "Oh my gosh, there's a really good possibility that a lot of our friends we went to high school with and a bunch of guys our age are just, getting slaughtered in this war." Now you fast forwarded something like, I don't know, 3 weeks, and I think we would have lost more people at this beginning part of the war had they just been at home in car accidents. I mean, it was such a well-played military advance, probably way better than anybody at the Defense Department thought we would do. So I just think it's very interesting. I don't think that the Iraqi people had that will to fight like Saddam thought they would.
Well, before we went in, you have to remember that we were bombing the crap out of them. I remember we were waiting to go, and we didn't know exactly when we were going to go, but the B-52s were just carpet bombing, and it was just rocking us to sleep at night. Just, you couldn't believe how loud it would shake the earth. We weren't even in the line of fire. You can imagine being over there in a bunker or whatever and just nonstop bombing like that. And that's what we did till they were just ready to quit.
That's got to be amazing just to experience that. But I'm sure after a few months you were ready to come home with that.
Oh yeah, and I had a little boy at the time, a son, and it's difficult, when you're a parent and you want to be with your kids and you don't know if you're going to make it back. That's the hardest thing in the world, is saying goodbye to loved ones and not know if you're coming back. You got to prepare for that, and
Sure.
That's the hardest part is preparing to go off and not know if you're going to come back.
Yeah, I'm sure it was. And this sounds like it's just one of the scary things that people will get into. And since this was your first time, I take it, really in a military skirmish and really being out there, did you run into any other kind of scary situations while you were in the Marines?
Oh, definitely.
You said that a little too quickly, as if maybe there's more than one.
Oh, there's several. There's a handful of times that God must have been looking out for me, because I don't know how I made it through. I remember this time we used to go to the Fort Bragg. We used to go to Fort Bragg and train a lot because they had really good ranges, grenade ranges, rifle ranges. We could shoot 50 cals, all kinds of stuff that we couldn't do on our ranges. So we used to go there for like a week at a time and utilize their ranges. One time we were on the grenade range, and I was a sergeant at the time, so they made me a pit NCO, and so I was in charge of guys coming down. There was two pits, and guys would get their grenade in a little canister and bring it down to us, and they were told not to touch it till they got down to us. Pull the grenade out. We'd tell them to pull the pin and then throw it, and there's this basically a cinder block protective pit, dirt built up around it to catch any shrapnel. They tell them pull the pin, which you see them on movies. They pull the pin with their teeth, and it's a cotter pin. And if you ever tried to do that, it'll break your teeth out. So that's all bullshit. But you pull the pin, and it's not easy to do. You pull the pin, and then it doesn't go off until you throw it, and the spoon pops off. It's got a spring-loaded spoon, and tell them to throw it and then get down. Well, this one time a guy came down. It was this Private Schmuckatelli, we'll call him. He comes down, and I give him the instructions, take it out of the canister, get ready to pull the pin. He tell him to throw it. At the night before, there was like a light rain, and there was like some mud and water on the bottom of this pit. He slips while he's throwing it, and the grenade goes straight up in the air. And I'm like, oh my God. So I grab him, throw him down, jump on top of him. The grenade, I didn't know if it was going to land on our side or the other side of the barricade, but it luckily landed just on the other side of the barricade and went off. Dirt's flying all over us. I'm trying not to beat the shit out of this guy because I'm freaking out. But I pull him up and tell him to get the hell out of the pit. And yeah, that was pretty scary.
Yeah, I'm quite sure that with the number of, let's face it, when most people are going to the military, they're kids. I mean, they're teenagers practically, and some of them are teenagers. They have to have more issues that happen in the military that we just don't hear about because we're not all around it. But I imagine that's not the first person that's flubbed a grenade throw in the armed services.
Well, I should have known things were going to go sideways when earlier in the day somebody threw a grenade and forgot to pull the pin.
Yeah.
But we didn't know why it wasn't going to go off. And the proper procedure is to call EOD, and they come out and get rid of it. Well, our first sergeant who had been, he was a Nam veteran, and he's looking on the binos, and he can see that it, the pin was still in it. So he goes out there and he's like, don't tell anybody that we did this. And he goes out, gets the grenade, brings it back, pulls the pin and throws it. He broke a lot of rules, but we were waiting for like an hour for that whole thing. So I should have known something was going to go wrong when that happened.
But at least your training schedule was back on track.
Yes.
That was the important thing.
Yes.
Right.
That's right.
He had dinner reservations or something. I don't know.
Well, the U.S. government has a lot of people in our military. In fact, from factretriever.com, the U.S. Department of Defense is considered the largest employer in the country with over 3 million employees. Who do you guys think number 2 is?
Walmart.
Oh, that
is exactly right.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, Walmart is number 2. They have 1.3 million employees. And third is ExxonMobil with 950,000 employees. So I thought that was kind of interesting. And I don't know, Phil, if you had the opportunity to work with any equipment that was considered, I don't know, state of the art or things that you could not speak about at the time, but DARPA, which is the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, they're part of the U.S. military. They are credited with inventing GPS, speech translation, and, although I know there's some politicians that might disagree, the internet. So this group...
I thought that was Al Gore.
That's what I've heard, but I'm not 100% sure. One more little invention they're working on is a chip that can be implanted into the brain directly to connect soldiers to computers. So the chip is no larger than a cubic centimeter, which is about the size of 2 nickels placed back to back. And it's supposed to be used to improve a soldier's hearing and vision. And this is one of the more important things that they're responsible for. Non-lubricated condoms. Those are actually standard issue in parachute pack survival kits for the U.S. military. So not only do they offer an option for safe sex practices, but the condoms also work as an emergency water canteen, capable of holding up to a liter of water. Did you get that training, Phil?
Yeah, I think they put one of those chips in my head, actually.
That would actually explain a lot. So I'm glad we have an answer now.
You talk about the technology. I was in mid 80s, late 80s, and they had us training on what was like, you'd put in words and it would go over the radio and then come back encrypted, but it was like early form of texting. And like this was way before texting. Yeah, it was pretty cool.
So during your time then, you told us about the grenade there. Were there other times that maybe you kind of felt like you were in the wrong place at the wrong time?
Yeah. Well, one time we were training in Portugal, and we were on a MEU, Marine Expeditionary Unit, and so we were in the Mediterranean, but we were training in Portugal, and our lieutenant was marching us. He was taking us to a range, but next thing we know, I start hearing some whizzing sounds, and grass is flying, and someone's shooting at us. And we're diving behind, whatever mounds of dirt we can find or whatever, and turns out this lieutenant had marched us into an impact area, and the heavy guns were shooting machine guns at us. Our command's getting on the radio, ceasefire, ceasefire. We had a channel designated for, talking to range control and trying to get them to quit. And it seemed like I said before, it seemed like it was probably 20 minutes, but it was probably more like 30 seconds, and they stopped firing. But it was pretty.
Yeah, I can only imagine time stands still when you are stuck in a situation where you have no control. You're just hoping it ends quickly.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I know we're friends with Phil through a group of people, and there are some other people that are in our group that were in the military, and I have Phil, you're going to have to forgive me. I don't know this story. I heard you start to tell one of our other friends who's in the military a story about you being caught in a situation with a helicopter. Can you let us know this story? Because from what I heard of it, it sounded pretty harrowing, but I know I got pulled away with something. So what happened with the helicopter story? Well,
this was actually earlier in my career, and I was a young Lance Corporal, I think, and I had a team leader, and we were out in 29 Palms, California. You think 29 Palms is sounds like a resort, but it's not. It's the middle of the desert. It's basically a firing range. Aircraft shoot artillery, infantry. Everybody uses this place, and it's called Combined Arms Exercise. And we were out there, and we were tasked with providing air defense for this area, and it was nightfall, and so we basically put the camo net on the Humvee. And we're in the middle of nowhere, and we're like, this is a good spot. And we bivouac. We just sleep under the stars and put a sleeping bag on a mat and put a cami net over us, and then go to sleep, get some rest. We're exhausted after a full day of running around and being out in the heat. I go to sleep and I'm out. And next thing I know, I hear what sounds like a helicopter getting closer and closer and closer. Next thing I know, the thing is on top of me. I can't even.
The helicopter is on top of you.
The landing gear landed right on my sleeping bag. I couldn't move. It had had me trapped. And I don't know if you've ever. I know Chris has used military sleeping bags. Zippers don't always work correctly,
Right.
and they get stuck easily. And I'm looking out the peephole, and I could see the landing light. And what had happened was, in the middle of the night, they came and set up a field expedient landing zone, and they broke chem lights, and I don't know if they put them basically on top of us. They didn't see us. And the guy said he thought that our cammed up Humvee was a rock. He thought it was like a boulder. Well, they realized once that blew away, and like the poles are bending and the camo net's flying, and then they saw the Humvee, and they had to have seen us. And I found out afterwards, the guy's like, we didn't see you guys, and we laid out the chem lights, and you guys were camoed up really well. And he's like, we didn't see you
Too well, apparently.
But it was a CH-46. It's the kind with the dual rotors.
Yeah.
You get awakened in the middle of the night with a helicopter landing on top of you. It's you're like, this is it, and it was pretty close to landing right on me.
Well, if there's any good news, Phil, the odds of that happening twice are probably really slim. So
Yeah.
I think you're in a good space now. That is crazy. I couldn't imagine. I bet you never slept underneath the sleeping bag again. You probably had your head out from that on.
And actually, I always slept in the Humvee from then on, sitting up.
That is some scary stuff. Now, I will tell you, just being the age you were, most of the people that I know who were in the military together, this is a lifelong bond with people. But what comes along with some of these lifelong bonds is you kind of play pranks on one another. Is there any kind of prank that either Chris or Phil can remember from your military days?
Some that I can't speak of on the the statute of limitations hasn't run out yet.
Fair enough.
I guess it was military justice, but this would be a prank as well. We had a guy that we were off for the weekend, and when you're gone for the weekend, you have to rotate. Somebody always has to be at the barracks and kind of just guard the barracks, right? Fire watch and things like that. And you do shifts, 4-hour shifts at a time. Well, when you go away for the weekend, you basically just drink all weekend because there's nothing else to do. So the guy that had the Sunday morning shift, he was there from 8 to noon. Well, he falls asleep. So when he fell asleep, the drill sergeants then came in and just wrecked the barracks.
Oh, wow.
So we all had to report back Sundays by 5 o'clock. We're out front, and then they're like, okay, privates, well, when we go upstairs, you're going to see quite a mess. And that's thanks to Private so-and-so. I won't say his name now, but so everyone's just glaring at this guy. So we go up, and I mean, our barracks are trashed. And then he goes, well, you guys are definitely going to have to clean this up, but first let's do a little PT. So we did push-ups and sit-ups and jumping jacks for about 2 hours. Oh, except for the private that fell asleep. He got to sit there and watch us.
Oh, great.
So now we're all pissed. So the next day, that night he falls asleep. Well, this guy had some Nair, like the hair removal. Not really sure why he had hair removal. Maybe what he does on the weekends is what he does on the weekends. But
different question.
But he had some. So he rubbed a little bit, just a nice little circle on the back of this guy's head. So we wake up in the morning, we're all looking, and his hair's there. We're like, man, this shit doesn't work. What's going on? We do our morning PT. Well, what we don't know is it's kind of water activated. So after we do our PT, now he's in the shower. And the shower is just a big room with a bunch of shower heads. And there's 10 dudes showering up, right? Almost like a prison shower that you see on TV. So he's showering, and all of a sudden he's like, oh my God, my hair is falling out. and he had a perfect circle on the back of his head where this guy rubbed this nair in his hair.
You know, I'd heard of that being a big practical joke. You replace somebody's shampoo with Nair. I had no idea it was that effective.
Yeah, it was awesome.
That reminds me of a story when I was at school. I went to school for after boot camp. You go to your school, learn your whatever you're going to do, and we went to Fort Bliss, Texas, which is an Army base, but it was where we went to school to learn our trade. And one night at the barracks, things got out of hand. Some guys were drinking a little too much. There was a hole punched in the wall. The rec area, some pool sticks were broken. Just some good clean fun. And the next morning, the CO, who was a marathoner, he always ran. He ran every morning, probably 10 miles. He's like, I don't know what happened last night at the barracks, but we're going to run until I'm no longer pissed. And Fort Bliss is out in the middle of the desert. We ran, I think it was either 16 or 18 miles. And anybody that fell out had to have duty the following weekend, which was a 96, a 4-day weekend. Call them 96, 96 hours. So nobody wanted to fall out. This was probably the hardest run I've ever been on, and I wasn't falling out, but I wasn't missing out on a long weekend. But anybody that fell out, they were picked up in the van, and then they had to go back and start duty.
So lucky for you, you had an Iron Man running pretty much your division there.
Yeah. Luckily, back then I was in great shape. You might not tell now, but I could run, 3-minute or 18-minute 3 miles. I could do pull-ups and sit-ups nonstop. But I need to get back to that because
I don't know if you know this, Phil, but Father Time always wins. So
He's undefeated.
Don't think, yeah, he is undefeated. Flojo couldn't outrun him, so I don't know why you think you can.
I'm faster than Flojo.
Oh, fair enough. Okay, I didn't realize that. All right, well, I think to wrap up the show here, I want to ask Chris, what'd you learn today?
Yeah, I learned that maybe I should switch to non-lubricated condoms.
That's right. They can really help you if you need to collect some water.
Right, I'm thirsty. I need a drink. I can just use that.
You never know when someone's going to make you go on a 10-mile run.
Right.
They're more likely to
or
break,
18.
though. That's what I heard.
Well, I'll tell you, on this episode, I learned a couple things. Number one, when I'm out sleeping in a sleeping bag, my head is going to be out. I'm going to know what's going on, even if it's just to see the bear eat me. I don't care. I want to see it happen. But more importantly, have solid footing before you throw that grenade. I think that's pretty important today. All right. Well, thank you very much for listening to the Not in the Job Description podcast. If you have a story you would like to share, or if you'd like to be a guest on our podcast, please let us know by sending an email with a brief description of your story to stories@notinthejob.com. And this is Scott McLaughlin for Chris Kiernan and Phil saying, we'll see you at work.